the quiet corridors of a life carefully constructed, secrets can fester like shadows, waiting for the smallest crack to slip through. This story plunges into the turbulent mind of Dani, a young woman whose world is upended when a single, yellowed letter reveals a truth she was never meant to uncover. Born not of blood but of circumstance, Dani must confront the deceptive walls of family, loyalty, and love that have defined her existence. As betrayal, anger, and confusion collide within her, every decision becomes a perilous gamble, every revelation a step further into a maze of doubt and despair. The narrative explores the relentless tension of hidden pasts, the fragile bonds of trust, and the destructive power of secrets, as Dani is forced to navigate a reality where nothing, and no one, is as it seems. Dani stood frozen in front of the wide-open safe, the metallic scent of cold steel mingling with the faint mustiness of decades-old secrets. Her hand trembled as she touched the yellowed letter, the edges fraying under her fingers. Just a few lines of faded ink, scarcely more than a paragraph, yet heavy enough to shatter the foundation of everything she had ever believed. She was not Anita's biological child. She had been adopted, swept into this family after some mysterious accident that no one had ever spoken of. The truth hit her like a blow to the chest, and the world she thought she knew crumbled silently around her. The rage that surged within Dani was unlike any she had known before. It was both agonizing and incendiary, a fire that wanted to consume everything it touched. She hated Anita, not just for the deception, not merely for the years of lies, but for the smiles and gentle reassurances that had masked a calculated, deliberate betrayal. And yet, part of her resented herself as well, for believing, for trusting blindly, for tethering her identity to a story that was never hers to claim. Every familiar gesture, every warm embrace, every seemingly tender word from Anita now felt poisoned, retroactively stained with falsehood. Dani felt simultaneously victimized and complicit, as if she had been dancing on the edge of a trap she didn't even know existed. The anger did not direct itself solely outward, it gnawed at her from within, a relentless undercurrent threatening to drown her in despair. Memories she had long buried surged back with blinding clarity. Sleepless nights, sitting alone in her softly lit room, wondering why a hollow ache never left her chest despite a life that seemed full on the surface, these moments suddenly had a reason. And that reason was abhorrent, incomprehensible. It was as though the world she had trusted had been meticulously constructed as a lie, brick by brick, just for her to live in blissful ignorance until the inevitable collapse. Dani's mind raced, fragmenting with every thought. One part of her wanted to confront Anita immediately, to demand answers, to scream until the air was thick with the sound of her betrayal. Another part recoiled, terrified of the enormity of the truth and of what might be revealed beyond it. This duality, anger and fear, revolt and yearning, pressed down on her relentlessly, leaving her gasping for rational thought. Even the smallest details of Anita's behavior now took on sinister significance. Dani recalled fleeting moments of evasiveness, subtle glances away when her adoption was vaguely hinted at, small silences heavy with implication. Every smile, every casual touch, every word of advice seemed suddenly loaded with hidden meaning. The world she had inhabited had not been real, it was an intricate facade, a performance in which she had unknowingly been the star. And yet, there was something more corrosive still than the revelation itself, the realization that she had been stripped of agency, that someone else had written the first chapters of her life. Decisions she had thought were hers, feelings she had nurtured, dreams she had pursued, they were all anchored in a fiction. The betrayal was not merely emotional, it was existential. She was an imposter in her own life, and the gravity of that truth made her pulse hammer with a mixture of fury and despair. The letter felt heavier each time Dani's fingers brushed over it. The scent of old ink and decayed paper became an invisible whip, lashing at her mind, reminding her that the past could never truly die. She asked herself bitterly whether anyone else had known, whether Anita's complicity had been shared with others who chose silence over truth. The possibility of collective deception intensified her anger, inflating it into a storm she could no longer contain. Every option Dani considered seemed perilous. Confront Anita, and risk an explosion that could annihilate the fragile remnants of familial bonds? Investigate the circumstances of her adoption, and unearth more secrets that might fracture her psyche further? Seek her biological mother, and plunge headlong into another labyrinth of unknown motives and potential betrayals? Each path was a gauntlet, fraught with risk, and yet each demanded action. Inaction was unbearable, yet action promised only pain. Dani's fury became methodical, calculated. It was no longer raw emotion, it was strategy, a coiled tension ready to strike. She envisioned the confrontation, every possibility mapped in a web of cause and effect. Would Anita deny everything, weave another layer of lies, or crumble under the weight of her own deceit? Would Dani's fury be enough to extract the truth, or would it destroy the fragile remnants of the relationships she still clung to? The questions themselves became daggers, each more painful than the last, as Dani realized that the only certainty in her life now was uncertainty itself. As she traced the yellowed lines of the letter once more, Dani's anger evolved into obsession. It was no longer about hurt or betrayal, it was about reclaiming control. She had been denied the knowledge of her origins, yet she would not allow that denial to define her future. Every heartbeat, every sharp inhale, was a declaration. She would uncover every hidden truth, confront every deception, and face the consequences of her choices, no matter how devastating. Her mind flickered between vengeance and sorrow, between calculated resolve and impulsive destructiveness. Dani saw herself standing at the edge of a precipice, knowing that one misstep could lead to irrevocable loss, yet understanding that inaction would be a surrender to the very deceit she loathed. The psychological tension was unbearable, a relentless push-pull that tore at her from all sides, demanding she make impossible decisions with incomplete information. The revelation had not just upended her identity, it had redefined the world itself. Every familiar space, the family home, the soft hum of everyday routines, the very cadence of her life, now felt alien, like walking through a town whose streets she had once loved but which had been constructed by strangers. Dani's emotional landscape became a battlefield where anger, grief, betrayal, and longing clashed in unrelenting waves. Even as she wrestled with these internal storms, Dani could feel the necessity of strategy. Confrontation could not be blind, nor could it be hasty. The deeper she looked, the more she realized that the betrayal extended beyond Anita, it was woven into the very fabric of the family she had trusted. Every interaction, every quiet word, every hidden glance might conceal ulterior motives. She could not simply react, she had to anticipate, to outmaneuver, to navigate this treacherous web with precision. Dani's rage now had purpose. It was a lens, sharpening her perception, clarifying which truths demanded pursuit and which deceptions had to be dismantled. She understood that the journey ahead would be painful, that every revelation might fracture her further, yet the fire within compelled her forward. The letter, fragile and yellowed, had not merely revealed a secret, it had ignited a storm, one that would shape every choice, every emotion, and every action she would take. Each passing moment deepened the conflict within her. Part of Dani wanted to flee, to bury herself in ignorance once more, to pretend the life she had known was real. But another part, fiercer and more unforgiving, refused. That part demanded truth, demanded justice, demanded confrontation, even if it meant tearing apart the very foundations of her existence. The internal battle raged on, a relentless tempest, as Dani recognized that her life had changed irrevocably, and that she alone would decide how to face the maelstrom ahead. The storm within Dani had raged for weeks, each day chipping away at the fragile remnants of trust she once held. Confrontations had been attempted, words had clashed like swords, and yet the truth remained a jagged edge lodged deep within her psyche. She had demanded answers from Anita, only to be met with half-truths and evasions that fueled the fire of her rage. Every revelation seemed to open another wound, every denial carved a deeper cavity into the heart of her identity. She had learned that betrayal could take many forms, not just in lies told, but in silences kept, in glances averted, in love conditional and carefully measured. Dani now stood at the precipice of her own decisions, staring into a chasm that threatened to swallow the remnants of her world. She realized that the family she had known was not merely flawed, it had been constructed with deliberate omissions, a lattice of deceit that extended far beyond Anita. Those she had trusted most, the siblings she had grown up alongside, the friends she had confided in, were all pieces in a puzzle orchestrated to keep her from knowing her true origins. The enormity of it left her reeling, yet paradoxically, it also ignited a clarity she had never known. She could no longer be a passive participant in a life written by others. The rage that had once consumed her had evolved into a resolute force. She understood that the path forward would be neither gentle nor forgiving, and that reconciliation, if it were possible at all, would come only at a tremendous cost. Dani weighed every option with surgical precision, to sever ties entirely, to extract vengeance, to rebuild connections on her own terms. Each choice was steeped in risk, each action carried the potential for heartbreak, devastation, or liberation. The weight of responsibility pressed on her shoulders, yet in that pressure, she discovered a strange empowerment. For the first time, Dani was fully aware that the author of her future would be no one but herself. She thought of the letter once more, the fragile yellowed parchment that had ignited this journey of reckoning. It had destroyed illusions, but it had also illuminated possibilities. The betrayal had been profound, yet it revealed the depth of her own resilience. Dani's mind, sharpened by anger and clarified by suffering, began to chart a path forward, one where truth, no matter how painful, was the only currency she would accept. She would confront, she would challenge, she would expose what had been hidden for so long. But she would do so not as a victim, not as a pawn, and not as a frightened girl trapped in a narrative written for her. She would do so as the architect of her own life, the arbiter of her own destiny. And yet, even with that resolve, Dani felt the weight of sorrow pressing into her chest. She mourned the family she thought she had, the innocence of belief that had been so cruelly stripped away. She mourned the simplicity of love untainted by secrets, the unbroken thread of identity that she had taken for granted. But in the grief, in the heartbreak, she found a strange liberation. The knowledge that survival, even in a world of deceit, was possible. That rage, honed and disciplined, could serve not only as a weapon against those who betrayed her, but as a shield against future illusions. Dani knew that the road ahead would be treacherous. There would be moments when anger threatened to overtake reason, when old wounds would bleed anew, when decisions made in desperation might yield consequences she could not yet imagine. And yet, she also knew that passivity was no longer an option. In the crucible of betrayal, she had forged herself anew. The woman who had once relied on the assurances of others now relied solely on the strength within her own heart and mind. She would confront the past, navigate the labyrinth of lies, and emerge with the unshakable certainty that her life, her identity, would no longer be dictated by secrets or betrayals. As she folded the letter carefully and placed it back in the safe, Dani felt a tremor of finality, but also of possibility. The echoes of anger still hummed beneath her skin, the shadows of betrayal still lingered, yet a new clarity guided her steps. She had been given a choice, a terrifying, exhilarating choice, to be defined by what had been hidden from her, or to define herself in defiance of it. With every heartbeat, Dani embraced the latter. The world might have deceived her, the family might have betrayed her, and the truths might have been painful beyond endurance, but Dani would rise. In the aftermath of revelation, in the ruins of trust, she would claim her power, face the consequences, and navigate the uncharted future with a mind sharpened by suffering, a heart tempered by betrayal, and a spirit unbroken, resolute, and unflinchingly her own.